The waves at Monterey Beach had been rough all morning, rolling higher than usual, their white crests crashing against the rocks with a steady roar. Jake Sullivan had brought his 6-year-old daughter Lily for what was supposed to be a quiet day by the shore, a little sandcastle building, maybe flying the small kite she carried everywhere. But then he saw her dark hair tangled in the surf body limp, drifting where the water met the sand. His heart lurched. Without a second thought, he dropped his jacket, sprinted into the waves, and pulled her toward land. Lily's scream pierced the air. "Daddy, she's not moving!" Her small hands clutched at his wet shirt, her eyes wide with terror. Jake knelt in the cold sand, ignoring the sting of salt water dripping down his face. His chest pounded, his breath uneven, but his hands were steady as he tilted the stranger's head back, checked her airway, and began compressions. 1, 2, 3. Breathe. His voice shook as he barked for someone nearby to call for help, but his eyes never left the woman's pale face. "Is she going to die?" Lily's voice quivered, her tiny fist trembling against his arm. Jake forced his own fear down. "No, sweetheart, she's not." He prayed those words would hold true because he wasn't sure himself. His palms pressed against her sternum, a rhythm, relentless, every count a plea. Then suddenly a gasp. Water burst from her lips. Her body jolted as if startled awake. She coughed violently, at first, then drew in a shaky breath. Relief crashed over Jake like another wave. He fell back on his heels, chest rising and falling as if he'd just surfaced from the ocean himself. The woman blinked, dazed, her eyes focusing slowly on his face. "What happened?" Her voice was barely audible against the roar of the surf. Jake steadied her by the arm. "You were drowning. You blacked out. I pulled you out." The words carried the weight of what could have been. Lily edged closer still, clinging to Jake, but unable to take her eyes off the stranger. Her little voice was almost a whisper. "You scared me." The woman turned her head, her face pale but her gaze gentle. She reached out, with trembling fingers, brushing Lily's hand as if it were the most natural thing to do. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I didn't mean to." Jake draped a towel from his bag over her shoulders, his touch firm but careful. "You should get checked at the lifeguard station." His voice remained low, protective. The woman nodded slowly, then looked at him as though remembering something vital. Her hand shot out, gripping his wrist with surprising strength. "Don't go. Please." The words escaped her lips just as the paramedics approached, a desperate whisper that lodged itself in Jake's chest. The ambulance lights flashed against the afternoon sun as they loaded her in. Jake stood with Lily, watching the woman's plea echoing in his mind. She'd looked at him not just with gratitude, but something deeper. Recognition, perhaps, as if she'd found something she'd been searching for. He shook the thought away. Just the shock of nearly drowning, nothing more. As the ambulance pulled away, Lily tugged at his hand. "Is she going to be okay, Daddy?" Jake squeezed her fingers. "She'll be fine, pumpkin. The doctors will take good care of her." He brushed sand from her cheeks, forcing a smile. "How about we grab some ice cream before heading home?" The drive back to Oakland felt longer than usual, the coastal highway stretching endlessly ahead. Jake's hands gripped the steering wheel, mind, replaying the woman's face, the desperation in her voice. It bothered him more than it should have. In the rearview mirror, he could see Lily in her booster seat, chocolate ice cream smeared across her chin, her eyes heavy with the day's excitement. Their apartment welcomed them with familiar comfort, small but meticulously maintained. Toys organized in colorful bins, photographs lining the hallway, mostly of Lily at various ages. None of Melanie, his ex-wife. Those had been removed 3 years ago, the day after he'd come home to find her wedding ring on the kitchen counter, beside a hastily scribbled note, "I can't do this anymore." Jake carried a sleeping Lily to her bedroom, decorated with glow-in-the-dark stars and dinosaur posters. Her current obsession. As he tucked her in, memories of that night crept back uninvited. Lily at 3, sobbing for her mother, not understanding why Mommy had gone away. Jake shell-shocked and terrified, trying to comfort her while his own world collapsed. He'd rebuilt everything from the ground up since then. Sullivan Construction, his small but growing company, their life together, just the two of them. He'd sworn he wouldn't let anything threaten that stability again. In the kitchen, Jake poured himself a whiskey, the amber liquid catching the light. He'd saved a life today. That should feel like enough. But something about the woman's eyes stayed with him, a loneliness he recognized all too well. Morning came with the clatter of Lily attempting to make breakfast, the smell of slightly burnt toast filling the apartment. Jake groaned, rolling out of bed. Monday meant school drop-off, then straight to the construction site where his crew was waiting. No time for beach rescues or mysterious women today. The construction site hummed with activity when Jake arrived. An old commercial building in downtown Oakland being retrofitted for earthquake safety and modern amenities. His company had won the bid against larger competitors, and Jake felt the weight of proving they deserved it. Mike Chen, his foreman and oldest friend from their Army days, approached with a clipboard and a knowing grin. "Boss, you're late. Rough weekend." Jake unloaded his truck, pulling out his tool belt. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." Mike's eyebrows shot up. "Try me. Can't be worse than Peter's showing up with a black eye because his kid's softball hit him square in the face." Jake found himself recounting the beach rescue, the words spilling out more easily than expected. Mike whistled low when he finished. "So you saved a drowning woman and didn't even get her name. That's some superhero shit right there, Sullivan." Jake shrugged it off, uncomfortable with the praise. Anyone would have done the same. "Let's check the progress on the east wall." He needed to focus. The Richardson project was hanging by a thread. His biggest opportunity yet, but also his biggest risk. If they lost it, payroll next month would be tight. The morning dissolved into meetings with suppliers arguing over delayed shipments and subcontractor schedules. By lunch, Jake had almost forgotten about the beach incident entirely. Until his phone rang with an unfamiliar number. He answered gruffly, balancing on a scaffold. "Sullivan." A woman's voice, hesitant yet somehow familiar. "Is this Jake Sullivan?" A pause. "The man from the beach yesterday?" His grip tightened on the phone. "Who's asking?" "Rebecca Morgan. You saved my life." Her voice was stronger now, composed in a way it hadn't been on the beach. "I wanted to thank you properly." Jake's free hand found the back of his neck, rubbing tension he hadn't realized was building there. "No thanks necessary. Just glad you're okay." "Please, I insist. Maybe dinner for you and your daughter." Something in her tone, polite persistence masking what sounded like genuine need. Jake's immediate instinct was to refuse. He'd built walls for a reason. But Lily had been asking about the beach lady since yesterday. "Look, Ms. Morgan." "Rebecca, please." "Rebecca, it's really not necessary. We were just in the right place at the right time." A slight pause. "At least let me thank you in person. I owe you that much." Before Jake could formulate another refusal, Mike was shouting about a problem with the electrical contractor. He sighed. "I have to go. Work emergency." "Of course," her voice cooled slightly. "May I call you later this week?" Jake hesitated, then relented. "Fine, but nothing fancy, all right?" After hanging up, Jake couldn't shake a nagging feeling. Something about her voice. The controlled composure of someone used to being obeyed. Who exactly had he pulled from the ocean? The answer arrived the next day in a sleek black Audi that purred to a stop outside the construction site. Workers paused, wolf whistles cutting through the air as a woman emerged. Dark hair swept into a neat bun, tailored navy suit that probably cost more than Jake made in a month. Rebecca Morgan. Recognition hit him instantly, though she looked remarkably different, dry and composed. She moved with confidence through the construction, debris ignoring the stares of his crew, her eyes fixed on Jake. Mike appeared at his shoulder, voice low. "Holy shit, that's Rebecca Morgan." As in Morgan Developments. As in one of the biggest real estate companies on the West Coast. Jake's stomach dropped. The Richardson project, the one hanging by a thread, was a Morgan Developments property. The coincidence seemed impossible. Rebecca stopped a few feet away, a slight smile warming her otherwise professional demeanor. "Mr. Sullivan, I hope I'm not interrupting." Jake squared his shoulders, suddenly conscious of his dusty work clothes and unshaven jaw. "Ms. Morgan, this is unexpected." His eyes narrowed slightly. "How did you find me?" She didn't flinch at his directness. "You mentioned Sullivan Construction on the phone. Not many companies by that name in Oakland." She extended a hand. "I thought perhaps we could talk somewhere quieter." Mike nudged him forward, muttering under his breath. "Be nice, man. Her company signs our checks." Jake reluctantly led her to the site trailer, offering her the only chair not covered in blueprints. "So, you found me." The words came out more accusatory than intended. Rebecca took in the cramped trailer, the organized chaos of a small construction business. I wanted to thank you properly. What you did, she paused, something vulnerable flashing across her face. It means more than you know. Jake leaned against his desk, arm crossed. Look, I appreciate you coming down here, but it's really not necessary. Anyone would have done the same. Rebecca's perfectly manicured fingernails tapped against her purse. Would they be they? She looked up, meeting his gaze directly. 3 people stood watching before you acted. You didn't hesitate. The silence stretched between them, filled with the distant sound of power tools and shouted instructions. Finally, Rebecca broke it. At least let me take you and your daughter to dinner. No strings attached. What? Jake studied her, trying to reconcile this composed businesswoman with the desperate person he'd pulled from the sea. Why is this so important to you? Something shifted in her expression, a crack in the professional veneer. Because I haven't felt human in a very long time. And for those few minutes on the beach, she didn't finish the thought, but she didn't need to. Jake recognized the loneliness in her eyes, the same he sometimes caught in his own reflection. Against his better judgment, he heard himself agreeing. Dinner, but we host. Nothing fancy. Relief softened her features. That would be lovely. After she left, Mike appeared in the doorway, grinning. So the Ice King Sullivan finally agreed to dinner with someone, with Rebecca Morgan, no less. Jake threw a crumpled paper at him. It's not like that. It's for Lily. She keeps asking about the beach lady. Mike's expression turned serious. Just be careful, man. People like her. They live in a different world. Jake dismissed the concern with a wave. It's one dinner, Mike, to get her to stop calling. That's it. But as he returned to work, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just opened a door he'd spent 3 years keeping firmly shut. That evening, Yeti Lily bounced around their apartment, excited about the beach lady coming for dinner. Jake watched her set the table with their mismatched plates, positioning her dinosaur figurines as centerpieces. Her enthusiasm both warmed and worried him. Remember, Pumpkin Ms. Morgan is just coming for dinner to say thank you. She won't be visiting all the time, okay? Lily nodded solemnly, then immediately resumed her excited chatter. Do you think she likes dinosaurs? I'm going to show her my T-Rex. He's the biggest. Jake sighed, stirring the pasta sauce. He'd chosen to make his grandmother's recipe, nothing fancy but homemade and hearty. The kind of meal that had gotten him through the worst days after Melanie left. Comfort food seemed appropriate somehow. The doorbell rang precisely at 7. Jake opened it to find Rebecca looking remarkably different from earlier that day. Gone was the power suit, replaced by jeans and a simple blue sweater. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders. She held a small bouquet of daisies in a paper bag. I brought dessert, she explained, handing him the bag. And these are for Lily. She extended the flowers. Jake stepped back, allowing her inside. You didn't need to bring anything. Rebecca smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. My mother taught me never to arrive empty-handed. Before Jake could respond, Lily appeared in the hallway, shyness suddenly overtaking her usual exuberance. She half hid behind Jake's leg, peering up at Rebecca. Rebecca crouched down, holding out the daisies. Hello again, Lily. I brought these for you. Your dad told me they're your favorite. Jake hadn't mentioned anything of the sort, but daisies were in fact Lily's favorite. She stepped forward, accepting the flowers with a small smile. They're pretty. Thank you. Lily's voice was soft, but her eyes shone with curiosity. Do you remember me from the beach? Rebecca nodded. Of course I do. You were very brave. Daddy says I'm brave like a T-Rex. Lily's shyness evaporated as she grabbed Rebecca's hand. Want to see my dinosaurs? I have 17. Before Jake could intervene, Lily was pulling Rebecca toward her bedroom. He followed, watching as his daughter eagerly showed off her collection, explaining each one with scientific details she'd memorized from her dinosaur encyclopedia. Rebecca listened with genuine interest, asking questions and admiring each plastic figure. Not once did she check her watch or show signs of the polite boredom adults often displayed with children's obsessions. When Lily declared her the perfect height to be the volcano in their dinosaur adventure, Rebecca laughed and played along without hesitation. Jake leaned against the door frame, a strange tightness in his chest. Lily hadn't been this immediately comfortable with anyone since Mrs. Chen Mike's mother, who occasionally watched her after school. Dinner's ready, he finally announced, breaking up the dinosaur extinction event being enacted on Lily's bedroom floor. In the kitchen, Rebecca insisted on helping despite Jake's protests. When he handed her lettuce to tear for the salad, she stared at it for a moment too long before awkwardly ripping it into pieces too large for a proper salad. Jake raised an eyebrow. "You don't cook much, do you?" A flush crept up her neck. "Is it that obvious?" She looked down at the mangled lettuce. "My skills are limited to microwave and takeout, I'm afraid." "Daddy makes the best food," Lily chimed in, climbing onto her chair. "He says restaurants are for people who don't know the secret of garlic." Jake winced. "I might have said that once or twice." Rebecca's laugh was unexpected, unguarded and genuine. "Well, I'm excited to learn the secret of garlic then." Throughout dinner, Jake found himself studying Rebecca when she wasn't looking. She ate with obvious appreciation, complimented the sauce sincerely, and listened to Lily's school stories as if they were the most fascinating things she'd ever heard. "So," Jake ventured when there was a natural pause, "Morgan Developments, that's quite a company." Rebecca dabbed her lips with a napkin. "It is." She hesitated. "My father built it from nothing. He passed away 8 months ago." "I'm sorry," Jake offered, the words automatic but sincere. She nodded, a shadow crossing her features. "Thank you. It's been an adjustment. Taking over the company wasn't exactly in my 5-year plan." "What was—" The question slipped out before Jake could stop it. Rebecca seemed surprised, as if no one had asked her that in a long time. "I was working on environmental impact assessments for building projects. Less glamorous than development, but important. I liked being in the field, making sure things were done right." Jake nodded, understanding. "Instead of boardrooms and spreadsheets." "Exactly." She smiled ruefully. "But family obligations have a way of rearranging priorities." Lily, who had been quietly eating, suddenly asked, "Did your daddy go to heaven like Granddad Sullivan?" Jake tensed. "Lily, that's not—" Rebecca gently interrupted. "It's okay," she turned to Lily. "Yes, he did. I miss him very much." Lily nodded solemnly. "Daddy says when people go to heaven, we keep their love inside us like a special treasure." Rebecca's eyes glistened suddenly. "Your daddy is very wise." The moment hung between them, unexpectedly intimate. Jake cleared his throat. "Who wants dessert?" After ice cream and more dinosaur stories. Lily began to yawn. Jake excused himself to put her to bed, leaving Rebecca in the living room. When he returned 20 minutes later, he found her examining the photographs on his bookshelf, mostly of Lily at various ages, a few of Jake's parents, one of his army unit. "She's wonderful," Rebecca said without turning around. "You've done an amazing job with her." Jake leaned against the wall. "She makes it easy. Kids are resilient." Rebecca turned, her expression thoughtful. "Not without the right support." She gestured to the photographs. No pictures of her mother. The question, direct but not unkind, caught Jake off guard. Most people tiptoed around the topic. "No, Melanie left when Lily was 3. No warning, no real explanation. Just decided family life wasn't for her." Rebecca didn't offer empty platitudes or pity. Instead, she asked, "How did you manage in the beginning?" Jake moved to the couch, the memory still raw despite the years. "One day at a time. I was terrified. Worked at construction during the day, stayed up reading parenting books at night. Learned to braid hair from YouTube videos." He shrugged, uncomfortable with the vulnerability. "You figure it out." Rebecca sat opposite him, her posture relaxed but dignified. "That takes tremendous strength." "Not strength, necessity." Jake found himself wanting to change the subject. "What about you married kids?" A shadow crossed her face. "No, career came first, then family obligations. I was engaged once, but—" She trailed off. "Let's just say he was more interested in the Morgan name than in Rebecca." Understanding passed between them, two people who'd been burned in different ways. As the evening drew to a close, Rebecca stood to leave. "Thank you for dinner. It was the most normal evening I've had in— I can't remember how long." At the door, she hesitated. "The Richardson Project. That's one of yours, isn't it?" Jake stiffened slightly. "Yes. Why?" "I heard there were some complications with the funding. I'll look into it." Jake's pride flared instantly. "I don't need special treatment." Rebecca's expression remained neutral. "It's not special treatment to ensure our contractors are treated fairly. It's good business." Before Jake could argue further, a sleek black car pulled up outside. The driver emerged standing at attention. Jake looked from the car to Rebecca, the gulf between their worlds suddenly very apparent. Your chariot awaits. Something like regret flickered across her face. Good night, Jake. Thank you again for everything. After she left, Jake stood in the doorway longer than necessary, watching the taillights disappear down the street. The apartment felt oddly empty without her presence. He shook the feeling away, locking the door firmly. 3 days passed without word from Rebecca. Jake threw himself into work, tackling the Richardson project issues with renewed determination. The funding complications were threatening to derail the entire job. Unexpected structural issues requiring additional permits and materials. If they lost this contract, he'd have to let people go. On Thursday morning, Jake was deep in an argument with a city inspector when his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Need to speak with you regarding Richardson project. Important. RM. Jake ignored it, focusing on convincing the inspector that their modifications were up to code. By the time he finished, 3 more messages had arrived. Found discrepancies in project documentation. Not your fault. Need your expertise. Please call. It concerns your company's future. His stomach tightened. He stepped away from the site, dialing the number. Rebecca answered immediately. Jake, thank you for calling back. Her voice was all business, nothing like the woman who had sat in his living room 3 nights ago. What's going on with the Richardson project? Not over the phone. Can you meet me at the Morgan Building, downtown 14th floor? Jake hesitated. I'm in the middle of a workday, Rebecca. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. A pause. It could save your contract. 90 minutes later, Jake sat in a conference room with a view of the entire Oakland skyline. The Morgan Building was all glass and steel, the wealth and power it represented undeniable. He felt out of place in his work boots and flannel, despite having changed his dustiest shirt before arriving. The door opened and Rebecca entered, followed by an older man with silver hair and a disapproving expression. Jake stood automatically. Jake, this is Stanley Wilson, our Vice President of Operations. Stan Jake Sullivan of Sullivan Construction. Stanley offered a perfunctory handshake, his eyes assessing Jake with thinly veiled skepticism. The beach hero, I presume. Jake's jaw tightened at the condescension in the man's tone. Just a contractor trying to complete your Richardson project on time and under budget. Rebecca interrupted smoothly. That's precisely why we're here. She spread blueprints and documents across the table. Jake, we've found some concerning discrepancies in the project specifications. For the next 30 minutes, Rebecca outlined what she'd discovered. The original plans had been altered after Jake's company won the bid, increasing the scope without adjusting the budget. The changes had Stanley's signature on them, but never went through proper channels. Jake studied the documents, anger building. These modifications would bankrupt us. We'd be working at a loss for months. Stanley cleared his throat. The modifications were necessary for safety. If your company cannot handle the requirements, Rebecca cut him off. The modifications were not in the original bid, Stan, and they weren't approved by me. Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. Changing contract terms after signings is not how Morgan Developments operates. Stanley's face reddened. You're relatively new to operations, Rebecca. Sometimes adjustments are necessary without burdening leadership with every detail. Jake watched the power dynamic with growing understanding. Stanley clearly didn't respect Rebecca's authority and was used to operating independently. Rebecca was fighting to establish control of her own company. Rebecca turned to Jake. I'm authorizing a contract amendment to accommodate the increased scope with appropriate budget adjustments. She slid a document across the table. Is this figure workable? Jake glanced down at the number, fair, even generous, but his pride balked at what felt like charity. I don't need special treatment because of what happened at the beach. Rebecca's gaze hardened. This has nothing to do with the beach, Mr. Sullivan. This is about business integrity. We made a mistake. We're correcting it. She stood smoothing her own skirt. Unless you'd prefer I find another contractor who wants the work. The challenge in her voice was clear. Jake examined the contract amendment again, then signed it shut. We'll have the revised timeline to you by Monday. Stanley huffed, clearly displeased but unwilling to argue further in front of an outsider. I have another meeting. Rebecca will discuss this later. He left without acknowledging Jake further. Once alone, the tension in Rebecca's shoulders visibly released. I apologize for Stan. He's been with the company since my father's early days. Jake folded the signed amendment. And he doesn't think you're qualified to run things. Rebecca's surprise at his directness was momentary. Something like that. She moved to the window, gazing out at the city. He thinks I'm too soft, that I don't understand what it takes. And what does it take? Jake joined her at the window, struck by how different the city looked from up here compared to ground level. According to Stan Ruthlessness, she turned to face him. My father built this company on relationships, not ruthlessness. I intend to honor that. Jake studied her, the composed exterior hiding a storm of determination. Why show me all this? You could have just fixed the contract issue. Because I want you to know this wasn't personal, either the problem or the solution. Her gaze was direct, unflinching. I don't mix business and personal matters. Jake nodded slowly, sensing there was more she wasn't saying. Well, thank you for fixing it. My crew will appreciate keeping their jobs. As he turned to leave, Rebecca called after him. Jake, he paused at the door. Lily asked me about dinosaurs at the museum. I promised I'd take her sometime. Does this weekend work? Jake hesitated. Every instinct warned him about getting too involved with Rebecca Morgan. Their worlds couldn't be more different. And yet Lily had talked about nothing but the beach lady for days. Sunday afternoon, but just a few hours, she has school the next day. Rebecca's smile was worth the risk. Sunday it is. Jake left the Morgan building with mixed emotions. He'd saved his biggest contract, but potentially opened the door to complications he wasn't sure he was ready for. Back at the construction site, Mike was waiting with questions written all over his face. Jake handed him the amended contract without comment. Mike whistled as he read the figures. So the Ice Queen has a heart after all. Jake took the paper back, irritated by the characterization. She was fixing a mistake their VP made, nothing more. Mike's eyebrows shot up. Really, because most CEOs I know would let a small contractor eat the cost rather than admit a mistake. Jake had no response to that. Instead, he changed the subject. We need to revise the timeline. Get the team together for tomorrow morning. Sunday arrived with unexpected nerves. Jake found himself changing his shirt twice, something he hadn't done for anything short of a funeral in years. Lily, by contrast, was pure excitement, wearing her dinosaur dress and clutching her favorite paleontologist action figure. They met Rebecca at the museum entrance, where she waited with 3 tickets already in hand. She'd dressed casually again, jeans, sneakers, and a light sweater. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, making her look younger, more approachable. Jake tried not to notice how the sunlight caught the highlights in her dark hair. Lily immediately took charge, grabbing both adults' hands and pulling them toward the dinosaur exhibit. The T-Rex is the biggest, but Triceratops is my favorite because she's a plant eater but still super tough. Rebecca listened attentively, asking questions that revealed she'd done her homework on dinosaurs since their dinner. Jake hung back slightly, watching them interact. Something about seeing his daughter so comfortable with Rebecca both warmed and worried him. Inside the main hall, Lily raced ahead to the massive T-Rex skeleton dominating the center. Rebecca slowed her pace to match Jake's. Thank you for this, she said quietly. I haven't been to a museum since college. Jake glanced at her, surprised. Really, with all your resources? A shadow crossed her features. Resources don't create time, or companions who want to go to museums instead of exclusive restaurants. Before Jake could respond, Lily called them over excitedly, pointing at dinosaur footprints embedded in stone. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of exhibits, interactive displays, and Lily's nonstop commentary. Rebecca participated with genuine enthusiasm, never checking her phone or appearing bored. At the museum cafe, while Lily carefully colored a dinosaur placemat, Rebecca leaned closer to Jake. She's incredibly knowledgeable for her age. Pride swelled in Jake's chest. She gets fixated on topics. Last year it was space. Before that, sea creatures. When she loves something, she wants to know everything about it. Rebecca's smile was thoughtful. She's lucky to have a parent who encourages her interest. I just buy the books. She does the rest. Jake watched his daughter, grateful every day for her curious mind. What about you? What were you obsessed with as a kid? The question seemed to catch Rebecca off guard. Architecture, actually. I used to sketch buildings and bridges. She laughed softly. Ironic that I ended up running a development company, but rarely get to design anything. Why didn't you become an architect? Rebecca's expression closed slightly. My father had different plans. Business school, then joining the company. She stirred her coffee absently. The path was always very clear. Jake recognized the weight of family expectations in her voice. And you never rebelled once. Her eyes took on a distant look. I spent a gap year working with Habitat for Humanity in New Orleans after Katrina. My father was livid, but it was the most meaningful work I've ever done. Jake could imagine a younger Rebecca, idealistic and determined, building homes in disaster zones. It matched the woman who insisted on fair contracts more than the CEO in designer clothes. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the cafe entrance. A man with a camera was being escorted out by security, but not before he managed to snap several photos in their direction. Rebecca tensed immediately, her posture shifting from relaxed to alert in seconds. We should go, she said, her voice tight. Now, please. Jake recognized the urgency in her tone. Lily, time to wrap up Pumpkin. We need to head out. Lily protested briefly, but Rebecca promised they could see the remaining exhibits another time. Jake watched Rebecca scan the exits, calculating the fastest way out. This wasn't her first experience with unwanted photography. They left through a side entrance, Rebecca guiding them to where her driver waited with the car. I'm sorry about this. I should have been more careful. Jake helped Lily into the back seat. What was that about? Rebecca sighed, glancing around warily. Gossip columnist. Morgan Developments is newsworthy, especially since my father's death. Heiress behavior sells magazines, apparently. She looked genuinely distressed. I should have known better than to come to such a public place. As they drove, Lily chattered about her favorite exhibits, oblivious to the adults' tension. Rebecca gradually relaxed, engaging with Lily's enthusiasm. When they reached Jake's apartment, Rebecca hesitated before getting out. May I speak with you privately for a moment? Jake nodded, asking Lily to wait on the steps. Once she was out of earshot, Rebecca turned to him, her expression troubled. Those photos will probably appear somewhere. Society pages, gossip blogs. Her voice was apologetic. I'm sorry to involve you and Lily in this. I should have been more thoughtful. Jake considered this, the implications sinking in. Will it cause problems for your company? Rebecca's laugh held no humor. Stanley will certainly think so. Inappropriate fraternization with contractors will probably be the least of his complaints. And for me, her eyes met his genuine concern evident. Possibly unwanted attention, questions. She hesitated. If you'd prefer to keep your distance after this, I would understand completely. Jake should have been relieved at the offered exit. This was exactly the complication he'd feared. Their different worlds colliding in ways that could affect his business, his reputation, and most importantly, Lily. The sensible response was to thank Rebecca for the museum visit and politely end whatever this was becoming. Instead, he found himself asking, is that what you want? The question hung between them, loaded with unspoken possibilities. Rebecca's composed exterior faltered momentarily, vulnerability seeping through. No, she admitted quietly, but what I want hasn't factored into most of my decisions lately. Jake recognized the weight of obligation in her voice, the same that had driven him forward through sleepless nights and uncertain days after Melanie left. The need to set personal desires aside for greater responsibilities. Lily had a great time today, he said finally. And so did I. Relief softened Rebecca's features. So did I, more than I can remember in a very long time. As if summoned by her name, Lily called from the steps. Daddy, can Rebecca stay for dinner? I want to show her my new dinosaur book. Jake looked at Rebecca questioningly. She smiled, the tension of the museum incident melting away. I'd love to if it's no imposition. That evening unfolded with unexpected ease. Rebecca helped Lily read from her dinosaur encyclopedia, sounding out the complicated names together. Jake prepared a simple meal, listening to their laughter from the kitchen. There was a rightness to the scene that both comforted and terrified him. After Lily was tucked in, Jake and Rebecca sat on the small balcony, the night air cool against their skin. Rebecca accepted the glass of wine he offered, taking a small sip. You have a beautiful family, Jake. A beautiful life. Jake looked out at the modest view. Neighboring apartments, a small park in the distance. Nothing like the panoramic vistas from the Morgan building. It's not much, but it's ours. Rebecca turned to face him fully. It's everything. Don't you see that you've built something real here? Her voice softened. Something that matters. The sincerity in her words caught him off guard. And you haven't, Rebecca's gaze dropped to her wine glass. I've inherited something significant. That's different from building it. She took another sip. Sometimes I feel like I'm just a placeholder, keeping my father's vision alive without having one of my own. Jake studied her profile in the dim light. What would your vision be if you could choose? The question seemed to surprise her as if no one had asked in a long time. Development that serves communities, not just investors. Building homes people can afford, not just luxury condos. She smiled ruefully. Exactly the kind of idealistic approach that makes Stanley lose sleep at night. Sounds like your father chose the right successor to me. Rebecca's eyes met his, something vulnerable and questioning in her gaze. You barely know me, Jake Sullivan. I know enough. He surprised himself with the certainty in his voice. I know you fixed a contract that many would have left broken. I know you spent 2 hours discussing dinosaurs with the 6-year-old when you could have been doing 100 more important things. I know you actually care about the impact your company has. The silence between them hummed with unspoken possibilities. Rebecca set down her wine glass, her fingers trembling slightly. I should go. It's getting late. Jake nodded, though part of him wanted to ask her to stay longer. I'll call you a cab. My driver's waiting around the corner. Of course she had a driver on standby. Another reminder of the gulf between their worlds. At the door, Rebecca hesitated. Thank you for today. For everything, really. She seemed to be struggling with something. Jake, there's something I should... His phone rang, cutting her off. Jake glanced at the screen, Mike's number. He wouldn't call this late unless it was an emergency. I'm sorry, I need to take this, he answered quickly. Mike, what's wrong, man? Mike's voice was tight with stress. Boss, we've got trouble. Big trouble. The Richardson project just got red tagged. City inspector came by after hours, claims our permits are invalid. We're shut down until further notice. Jake's blood ran cold. That's impossible. We have everything in order. Tell that to the notice on our fence. This smells like sabotage, Jake. Rebecca watched his expression, dark and concern evident in her eyes. When he hung up, she asked quietly, What happened? Jake stared at her, sudden suspicion flaring. The timing was too convenient, right after their public outing, right after the amended contract. The Richardson project just got shut down by the city. Invalid permits, apparently. Rebecca's surprise seemed genuine. That's not possible. I reviewed those permits myself. Well, someone has a different opinion. Jake's voice hardened. Convenient timing, isn't it? Rebecca stiffened. What are you implying? I don't know, but it seems strange that everything was fine until I started spending time with the CEO. Hurt flashed across Rebecca's face. You think I'd sabotage my own project? To what end, Jake? He ran a hand through his hair, frustration mounting. I don't know what to think. I just know my crew could lose weeks of wages while this gets sorted out. I'll look into it first thing tomorrow. Rebecca promised, her professional demeanor sliding back into place. This has to be a mistake. Jake nodded curtly, suddenly eager for her to leave. He needed space to think, to plan how to protect his company and his people. That would be appreciated. Rebecca reached for the door, then paused, turning back. For what it's worth, I had no knowledge of this, and I would never play games with people's livelihoods. Her eyes held his, unwavering. Not everyone in my world is the villain you seem to think we are. After she left, Jake stood in the hallway, conflicting emotions warring within him. He wanted to believe her, but experience had taught him that people with power rarely considered the consequences for those without it. And he couldn't afford to be naive, not with his employees' welfare and Lily's stability at stake. He spent the night reviewing permits and contracts, searching for any oversight that could have triggered the red tag. By morning, he was no closer to answers, but his resolve had hardened. Whatever was happening with the Richardson project, he would fight it. And until he knew exactly what he was fighting against, he would keep his distance from Rebecca Morgan, no matter how much Lily might miss her dinosaur reading partner. He instructed the crew to use the day for maintenance and inventory, promising full pay regardless. Then he drove to the Morgan building, determined to understand exactly what he and his company had stumbled into. The receptionist recognized him immediately. "Mr. Sullivan, Ms. Morgan mentioned you might stop by. She's in a meeting currently, but asked that you be shown to her office to wait." Jake followed the woman through the sleek corridors to an impressive corner office with panoramic views of the bay. Unlike the sterile conference room from his previous visit, Rebecca's personal space showed touches of individuality. Photographs of global architecture, a small collection of rocks and minerals, several well-worn books on sustainable design. On her desk sat a single-frame photograph of an older man with Rebecca's same dark eyes, his arm around a younger Rebecca, at what appeared to be a construction site. Her father Jake presumed. The door opened abruptly and Rebecca entered, her professional composure slightly frayed at the edges. She seemed unsurprised to find Jake waiting. "Stanley denied everything, of course," she said without preamble. "Claims he was at a charity function when my credentials were used. Conveniently, several board members can vouch for him." Jake leaned against her desk. "So someone else is doing his dirty work." Rebecca sank into her chair, exhaustion briefly visible before she straightened. "Or he's more tech-savvy than his Luddite act suggests." She ran a hand through her hair, a surprisingly vulnerable gesture. "The permits will be reinstated tomorrow. I've personally signed off on an accelerated review." "Thank you." Jake hesitated, then added, "This isn't just about a contract for me. Those men out there have families, mortgages." Rebecca's gaze softened. "I know. That's why this is so infuriating." She stood again, moving to the window. "Jake, there's something you should know. Something I tried to tell you last night." The seriousness in her tone put Jake on alert. "What is it?" "The Richardson Project." She turned to face him fully. "It's more than just a renovation. My father had special plans for that building. It's meant to become a community center, affordable childcare job, training, healthcare access. His legacy project." Jake absorbed this information. "Why keep that quiet?" "Board politics. Some members, Stanley chief among them, think it's a waste of valuable real estate." Her voice hardened with determination. "They'd rather build luxury condos, more profitable in the short term." Understanding dawned. "And you're fighting to keep your father's vision intact." Rebecca nodded. "The Richardson Project is the first phase. Your renovation plans preserve the structural elements needed for the community center design." She took a deep breath. "Stanley would rather see the project fail completely than succeed under my direction." Jake stepped closer, the pieces falling into place. "And my company was caught in the middle." "Yes, I'm sorry." Her apology was sincere. "When I saw your bid, the attention to detail, the preservation of historical elements, I knew you were the right contractor. I didn't realize Stanley would go to such lengths to undermine both of us." Before Jake could respond, a sharp knock interrupted them. The door opened to reveal Stanley Wilson himself, all immaculately dressed and wearing an expression of practiced concern. He stopped short upon seeing Jake. Rebecca, I didn't realize you had company." His tone conveyed exactly what he thought of finding a contractor in the CEO's office. "The board members are waiting in the conference room." Rebecca straightened, professional mask sliding back into place. "Thank you, Stan. I'll be right there." She turned to Jake. "I'm afraid I have to cut this short, but we'll talk soon." Jake nodded, understanding the dismissal. As he moved to leave, Stanley remained in the doorway, forcing Jake to brush past him. The older man leaned in slightly. "A word of advice, Mr. Sullivan," he murmured, too low for Rebecca to hear. "Men like you are useful tools until they're not. Don't mistake utility for importance." Jake met the man's cold gaze, refusing to be intimidated. "And men like you mistake wealth for character every single day." Stanley's smile never reached his eyes. "We'll see who's still standing when this is finished, won't we?" As Jake left the Morgan building, the encounter left a bitter taste. Stanley's threat had been thinly veiled, but Jake had faced worse adversaries. What troubled him more was the realization of how deep the corporate politics ran and how precarious Rebecca's position might be. For the first time, he considered that perhaps she needed an ally as much as he did, someone who saw beyond the Morgan name and wealth to the person struggling to honor her father's legacy while finding her own path. That evening, after putting Lily to bed, Jake sat on his balcony with a beer weighing his options. The sensible choice was to complete the Richardson project professionally, keep his distance from Rebecca personally, and avoid further entanglement in Morgan Development's internal power struggles. But when his phone lit up with a text from Rebecca, he found himself answering immediately. Permits will be reinstated tomorrow morning. Work can resume. I'm sorry for the trouble. Jake hesitated, then typed, not your fault. Thank you for fixing it. Three dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again before her reply came through. Lily mentioned wanting to see the aquarium next. Would that be all right? No photographers this time, I promise. Jake stared at the message, knowing he stood at a crossroads. Getting further involved with Rebecca Morgan meant risking his carefully constructed stability, potentially exposing Lily to disappointment, and possibly even jeopardizing his company's reputation. Yet he found himself typing Sunday afternoon, she'll be thrilled. As he set the phone down, Jake acknowledged the truth he had been avoiding. Whatever was developing between him and Rebecca, friendship, attraction, or something not yet defined, it had already passed the point of casual acquaintance. The question was no longer whether he would get involved in Rebecca Morgan's complicated life, but how deep that involvement would go, and whether either of them would emerge unscathed. The battle lines had been drawn with Stanley's veiled threat, and Jake had chosen his side, perhaps before he even realized there was a choice to make. All he could do now was protect his company, his daughter, and perhaps the remarkable woman who had literally washed into his life on the tide of a Monterey beach. The ballroom of the Grand Oakland Hotel glittered with chandeliers and the sparkle of expensive jewelry. Jake adjusted his rented tuxedo, feeling like an imposter among the city's elite. Lily fidgeted beside him in her new dress, her eyes wide at the spectacle. Remember what we talked about pumpkin best behavior tonight? Jake smoothed her hair, tucking a strand behind her ear. Lily nodded solemnly. Because it's important for Ms. Rebecca. She looked around the crowded room. Where is she? Jake scanned the sea of evening wear and forced smiles, finally spotting a Rebecca across the room. She stood surrounded by older men in expensive suits, her posture perfect, her smile practiced. Even from a distance, Jake could see the tension in her shoulders and the slight strain around her eyes. There she is. But let's wait until she's not so busy, okay? As they made their way to the refreshment table, Jake couldn't help overhearing snippets of conversation from nearby guests. Too young to handle the company. Father was a visionary, but she's too idealistic. Needs a firm hand to guide her. Stanley's the obvious choice. Jake reached for a glass of water, his jaw tightening. He'd agreed to attend this charity gala at Rebecca's request, though everything in him had resisted. This wasn't his world-polished floors and polite backstabbing. But after the permit issue had been resolved, Rebecca had mentioned how much it would mean to have friendly faces at her first major event as CEO. Now watching her navigate the political waters of Oakland's business elite, he understood why. A distinguished older man with silver hair approached Jake, his assessment unconcealed, as he took in Jake's rented tuxedo. You must be Sullivan. Stanley mentioned Rebecca had invited a contractor. His smile never reached his eyes. Charles Blackwood, Morgan Development's board member. Jake shook the offered hand, noting the perfectly manicured nails and the subtle test of strength in the grip. Jake Sullivan, and this is my daughter Lily. Blackwood barely glanced at Lily. Interesting choice, bringing a child to an evening function. Jake's response died on his lips as he caught sight of Stanley Wilson approaching Rebecca, placing a proprietary hand on her lower back as he interrupted her conversation. The flash of discomfort that crossed her face was brief but unmistakable. Lily tugged at Jake's sleeve. Daddy, I need to use the bathroom. Excusing himself from Blackwood with poorly disguised relief, Jake led Lily toward the hallway. As they passed a partially open door, raised voices caught his attention. This isn't what we discussed, Stanley. Rebecca's voice controlled but firm. The Richardson project remains as my father envisioned it. Your father isn't here anymore. Stanley's tone was patronizing. The board expects results, not charity cases. If you can't make the difficult decisions, don't mistake my compassion for weakness. The steel in Rebecca's voice would have made Jake smile under different circumstances. The community center stays. End of discussion. Jake quickly guided Lily past the door, not wanting to be caught eavesdropping, but the exchange confirmed his suspicions. Stanley was actively undermining Rebecca's authority, likely with the support of board members like Blackwood. After helping Lily in the restroom, they returned to find Rebecca now standing alone, watching the crowd with a glass of champagne in hand. She brightened upon seeing them, her public mask slipping into something more genuine. "You came." Relief colored her words as she bent to Lily's level. "And don't you look beautiful tonight?" Lily beamed, twirling to show off her dress. "You look like a princess." Rebecca smiled, touching the simple pearl necklace at her throat. "Thank you. This was my mother's. I wear it for special occasions." As Lily chattered about the fancy chandeliers, Jake studied Rebecca. Despite the designer gown and flawless makeup, something vulnerable lingered in her eyes. The weight of expectation and scrutiny. "How are you holding up?" Jake kept his voice low. Rebecca's smile tightened. "Navigating sharks while wearing heels, the usual." She nodded toward a group of older men watching them. "The board isn't thrilled about my father's community center plans. They see dollar signs, not social responsibility." Before Jake could respond, a waiter approached with a tray of champagne flutes. As he passed, Lily reached for a glass of water at the edge of the tray, accidentally knocking into an elegant, older woman. Water splashed across the woman's silk dress, causing her to gasp dramatically. "My Valentino." The woman glared at Lily, who shrank against Jake's leg. Jake opened his mouth to apologize, but Rebecca smoothly intervened, grabbing a napkin from a nearby table. "Mrs. Harrington, let me help. It's just water, it won't stain." Her tone was deferential yet confident. "May I introduce Jake Sullivan and his daughter, Lily. Jake's company is handling the Richardson project renovation." Mrs. Harrington sniffed but allowed Rebecca to blot her dress. "The community center, Harold mentioned that. Seemed a waste of prime real estate to me." Rebecca's smile never faltered. "Actually, economic impact studies show community investment raises property values throughout the area. I'd be happy to share the research with Harold before the next board meeting." The older woman's expression shifted slightly. "Well, perhaps I will mention it." As Mrs. Harrington moved away, Jake caught the barely perceptible slump of Rebecca's shoulders, a momentary break in her perfect posture. "Nice save." Rebecca's smile turned genuine. "Politics is the art of making people believe your ideas were theirs all along." She crouched to Lily's level. "Don't worry about the spill, sweetheart. Accidents happen." The tension eased from Lily's small frame. "You're not mad?" "Of course not." Rebecca's voice softened. "In fact, I think we could both use some fresh air. There's a garden terrace with a fountain. Would you like to see it?" Lily nodded enthusiastically, and Jake felt a rush of gratitude as Rebecca led them away from the judgmental stares and political maneuvering. On the terrace, Lily immediately ran to the fountain, fascinated by the coins glittering at the bottom. Rebecca leaned against the stone balustrade, exhaling deeply. "Thank you for coming tonight, both of you." Jake joined her, loosening his bow tie slightly. "Not exactly our natural habitat." "Nor mine, if I'm honest." Rebecca gazed at the garden below, moonlight silvering her profile. "My father could work a room like this effortlessly. I'm still learning to fake it." "You seemed pretty convincing to me." Rebecca laughed softly. "Years of practice. Boarding school charity functions, debutante balls." She trailed off, watching Lily. "She's lucky, you know, to have a childhood with real experiences, not just performances." Something in her tone made Jake look closer. A wistfulness he hadn't expected. "Wasn't all bad, was it? Growing up with privilege." Rebecca considered this, twisting her mother's pearl necklace between her fingers. "The privilege itself, no. But the expectations, the constant scrutiny." She straightened. "You learn early that vulnerability is weakness, and weakness isn't tolerated in business." Jake thought of his own childhood, modest, but loving his father, teaching him to build, and fix his mother, ensuring he knew how to cook and care for himself. Sounds lonely. It was. The simple admission hung between them, more intimate than any declaration. A commotion from inside interrupted the moment. Stanley stood in the doorway, his expression thunderous. "Rebecca, the mayor has arrived. He's asking for you specifically." His gaze slid dismissively over Jake. "This is hardly the time for distractions." Rebecca straightened, CEO mask sliding back into place. "Of course, please tell Mayor Johnson I'll be right there." As Stanley retreated, she turned apologetically to Jake. Duty calls. Jake nodded, understanding. Go, we'll be fine out here. As Rebecca moved to leave, Lily called out, will you come see us again soon? Daddy said we could make cookies next time. Rebecca paused, glancing uncertainly at Jake, who shrugged. He didn't remember promising cookies, but he couldn't deny the thought of Rebecca in his kitchen again was appealing. I'd like that very much, Lily. Rebecca smiled, then disappeared back into the glittering ballroom, leaving Jake with the distinct impression he was crossing boundaries he'd established for good reason. 2 weeks passed in a blur of construction, deadlines, and school activities. The Richardson project progressed steadily, now properly funded and permitted. Rebecca checked in occasionally via text, but her schedule kept her too busy for visits. Jake told himself it was for the best, this natural distance, reminding them both of the reality of their different worlds. Then came the day everything changed. Jake was supervising the installation of structural supports when Mike approached, concern etched across his face. Boss, you need to see this. He handed Jake his phone open to a local news site. The headline made Jake's stomach drop. Morgan Development CEO Rebecca Morgan's new romance, business or pleasure. Below was a photo of them at the museum, Rebecca kneeling beside Lily, Jake standing protectively nearby. Damn vultures. Jake scanned the article, which speculated whether their relationship was influencing business decisions, specifically mentioning the mysteriously reinstated permits on the Richardson project. Mike scratched his beard. This gonna be a problem. Before Jake could answer, his phone rang. Rebecca. Have you seen it? Her voice was tight, controlled. What's now? It's garbage journalism. Jake moved away from curious ears, lowering his voice. Will this cause problems for you? Rebecca's sigh carried through the line. Stanley's already called an emergency board meeting. Apparently, my personal judgment is being questioned. Jake's grip tightened on the phone. I'll issue a statement. Make it clear there's nothing inappropriate. No. Rebecca cut him off. That would only feed the story. I can handle the board. A pause. But Jake, it might be better if we... She didn't finish the sentence, but her meaning was clear. Step back. The words tasted bitter. Is that what you want? Rebecca's silence stretched painfully. What I want hasn't factored into most of my decisions lately. Her echo of words spoken weeks ago twisted something in Jake's chest. I have to go. The board is waiting. The call ended, leaving Jake staring at his phone. Mike approached cautiously. Everything okay, boss? Jake pocketed his phone, pushing down the complicated emotions. Fine, let's get back to work. These supports won't install themselves. That evening, Jake sat at his kitchen table, nursing a beer while Lily colored nearby. He checked the news periodically throughout the day, finding no further developments about Rebecca's board meeting. His instinct was to call to make sure she was okay, but something held him back. Pride, maybe, or the growing realization that getting involved with Rebecca Morgan meant entering a world where his presence could actually harm her. Lily looked up from her drawing. When is Rebecca coming to make cookies? You promised. Jake sighed, unsure how to explain tabloid journalism and corporate politics to a 6-year-old. She's really busy with work right now, Pumpkin. It might be a while. Lily's face fell. But she likes us. She said so. Sometimes adults have complicated lives, Lil. It's not always about what they like or don't like. Jake ran a hand through his hair, hating the disappointment in his daughter's eyes. Is it because she's rich and we're not? Lily's question caught him completely off guard. What no, who told you that? Lily shrugged. Jimmy at school said his mom saw us in the newspaper and said Rebecca was too fancy for people like us. Anger flared in Jake's chest, not at Lily, but at the casual cruelty of playground gossip fueled by adult prejudice. That's not true, Lily. People can be friends no matter how much money they have. But she's not coming over anymore. Jake had no good answer for that. Before he could formulate a response, his phone chimed with a text. Rebecca, can we talk in person? 20 minutes later, after arranging for Mike's mother to watch Lily, Jake found himself driving to an address Rebecca had sent, not her penthouse or office, but a small coffee shop in a quiet neighborhood. He spotted her immediately upon entering, tucked into a corner booth, wearing jeans and an oversized sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked up as he approached, dark circles under her eyes betraying her exhaustion. Thank you for coming. Jake slid into the booth across from her, noting the untouched cup of tea between her hands. How bad was it? With the board. Rebecca's fingers tightened around her mug. Stanley moved for a vote of no confidence. It failed, but barely. Charles Blackwood was the swing vote, surprisingly enough. The guy I met at the gala didn't seem like your biggest fan. Rebecca smiled faintly. Charles and my father were friends for 40 years. He might not approve of all my decisions, but he respects my right to make them. She paused, studying Jake's face. I'm sorry about the article, about all of this. Jake shrugged, feigning a casualness he didn't feel. Not your fault tabloids exist. He hesitated. But maybe they have a point, about us being from different worlds. Something flashed in Rebecca's eyes, hurt quickly, masked. Is that what you think, that this was a mistake? I think, Jake chose his words carefully, I think you have enough battles without adding me to the list. Rebecca's laugh held no humor. So you're making that decision for me, deciding what battles I can handle. Jake leaned forward, frustration bubbling up. That's not what I meant. But you can't deny the reality. You're fighting for control of your company. I'm trying to keep my small business afloat. Those aren't compatible problems. They could be, Rebecca's voice softened, if we wanted them to be. The implication hung between them, neither willing to directly address what wanting might mean. Finally, Jake broke the silence. Lily asked when you're coming over to make cookies. Apparently, I promised. Rebecca's expression lightened momentarily. Did you now, apparently? Jake ran a hand through his hair. Look, I don't know what this is between us. I don't know if it makes any sense, but Lily's already attached, and if I'm honest, he met her gaze directly. So am I. Rebecca's breath caught, her practiced composure slipping. Jake? The coffee shop door chimed, drawing their attention. Jake froze as a familiar figure entered Melanie, his ex-wife looking exactly as she had 3 years ago when she walked out of their lives. She scanned the room, then spotted Jake, her eyes widening in recognition. Rebecca noticed his reaction. Jake, what's wrong? Before he could answer, Melanie approached their table, her expression uncertain. Jake, I thought that was you. Jake stood, automatically, shock giving way to a strange numbness. Melanie, what are you doing here? Melanie shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Rebecca. I moved back to Oakland last month. I've been trying to find the right time to... She trailed off, then straightened. I want to see Lily. The words hit Jake like a physical blow. 3 years of silence, and now she wanted back in their daughter's life. As if sensing his thoughts, Melanie continued. I know I don't deserve it, but she's my daughter too, Jake. Rebecca rose quietly. I should give you two some privacy. Yeah, Jake caught her arm, suddenly unwilling to face this alone. Stay, please. He turned back to Melanie. This isn't a good time to discuss this. If you're serious, call me tomorrow and we can talk properly. Melanie nodded, casting a curious glance at Rebecca before leaving. Once she was gone, Jake sank back into the booth, his hands slightly shaking. That was Lily's mother. Rebecca sat beside him now, close enough that their shoulders touched. I gathered. Are you okay? I don't know. Jake stared at his hands. 3 years. Not a call, not a letter. Now she just shows up. Anger began replacing shock. What right does she have to waltz back in when Lily's finally stopped asking for her? Rebecca placed a hand over his. What will you tell Lily? Jake looked up, meeting Rebecca's steady gaze. I don't know. Part of me wants to protect her from another disappointment. But is that my decision to make? Children are resilient, but they need truth. Rebecca's voice was gentle. Even difficult truths. Jake nodded slowly. I'll have to think about it. He squeezed her hand. Thank you for staying. Rebecca smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes despite the evening's complications. Always. The word hung between them, loaded with meaning neither was ready to fully explore. But as they sat together in the quiet coffee shop, Jake felt something shift. A recognition that whatever challenges lay ahead facing them together somehow felt right. The Richardson Project site hummed with activity under the late April sun. Jake moved between work areas, checking progress, his mind still churning over Melanie's reappearance 2 days earlier. He'd agreed to let her meet Lily that weekend, a decision that left him sleepless with worry. Mike appeared at his side, clipboard in hand. City inspector just left. We passed all structural checks. Jake nodded, relieved by the good news. Great, let's start on the East Wing renovation tomorrow. About that, Mike hesitated. There's a problem with the supplier. The custom steel beams we ordered have been delayed. Again. Jake swore under his breath. That's the third time. We can't afford to fall behind schedule. I know, but Mike broke off his attention, caught by something over Jake's shoulder. Heads up, trouble at 2 o'clock. Jake turned to see Stanley Wilson striding across the construction site, pristine shoes collecting dust, with each step his face set in grim lines. Mr. Sullivan, Stanley made no attempt to hide his disdain. I need a word. Jake gestured for Mike to continue his rounds. What can I do for you, Mr. Wilson? Stanley surveyed the construction site with obvious skepticism. The board has concerns about the project timeline. I understand you're experiencing delays. Jake's guard immediately rose. Nothing unusual for a project this size. We're still on target for completion. Stanley smiled thinly. That's not what our sources indicate. In fact, I've taken the liberty of bringing in consultants to evaluate the situation. He handed Jake a document. We're implementing new specifications for the East Wing. Jake scanned the pages, his blood pressure rising with each line. These changes would add months to the timeline and blow the budget by 30%. This isn't what we agreed to. Plans evolve, Mr. Sullivan. Stanley adjusted his cufflinks. If Sullivan Construction isn't equipped to handle the modifications the board would understand completely, we could release you from the contract, no penalties. The trap was obvious, either accept impossible demands or walk away from the biggest contract his company had ever landed. Jake kept his voice level with effort. I'll need to discuss this with Ms. Morgan. These changes directly contradict her instructions. Stanley's smile hardened. Rebecca is currently indisposed. Family emergency. As executive vice president, I have full authority to make operational decisions in her absence. Jake's instincts flared. Rebecca hadn't mentioned any emergency when they'd texted the previous evening. I'll still need official confirmation before making any changes to the approved plans. Of course, Stanley's tone dripped with condescension. Though I should warn you, Mr. Sullivan, contractors who can't adapt rarely thrive in this industry. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and regarding your personal relationship with our CEO, the board finds it concerning. Very concerning indeed. Jake watched him walk away, in anger simmering beneath his professional exterior. The moment Stanley's car pulled away, he called Rebecca. The call went straight to voicemail. He tried her office next. Ms. Morgan's office, her assistant answered. This is Jake Sullivan. I need to speak with Rebecca urgently. I'm sorry, Mr. Sullivan. Ms. Morgan is unavailable today. Did she mention when she'll return? It's about the Richardson project. A slight hesitation. Ms. Morgan didn't specify. She called this morning requesting her meetings be rescheduled. Family matter, I believe. Jake thanked the assistant and hung up, unease growing. Stanley's appearance, the convenient family emergency, the sudden project changes, none of it felt right. He called Rebecca's cell again, this time leaving a message. Rebecca, it's Jake. Stanley just showed up with major changes to the project. Call me back as soon as you can. 2 hours passed with no response. Jake was reviewing the proposed changes with Mike when his phone rang, an unfamiliar number. Sullivan. Jake, it's Rebecca. Her voice was hushed, tension evident even through the poor connection. I'm sorry I missed your calls. Things are complicated right now. Jake moved away from the noise of the construction site. What's going on? Stanley showed up with radical changes to the project, claiming you're dealing with a family emergency. Rebecca's bitter laugh came through the line. The only emergency is Stanley making his move sooner than I expected. He's locked me out of the system, Jake. My credentials, my email, everything. What? How is that possible? He convinced enough board members I'm emotionally compromised. Used the tabloid stories project delays. He orchestrated anything to build his case. Rebecca's voice hardened. I'm fighting back, but I need time. Whatever he's asking you to do with the project stall. He wants changes that would make completion impossible. I think he's trying to force us out. Of course he is. Rebecca sounded exhausted. The community center is the last thing standing between him and selling that property to developers. If your company walks away, he wins. Jake rubbed his temple, a headache forming. I can't agree to his changes, but refusing outright gives him exactly what he wants. I need 48 hours. Rebecca's voice lowered further. I'm meeting with Charles Blackwood tonight. He has enough influence to force an emergency board meeting. What can I do? Rebecca paused. Document everything. Every change Stanley requests, every deviation from the original plans. I need evidence of interference. Consider it done. Jake hesitated. Rebecca, be careful. If he's willing to go this far. I know. Her voice softened. I'll be in touch soon. And Jake, thank you for believing in me. After hanging up, Jake gathered his team leads explaining the situation in broad strokes without mentioning the corporate politics. We need to document everything, follow the original plans exactly, and buy time. Can I count on you all? Mike spoke for the group. We're with you, boss. But if this goes south, Jake understood the unspoken concern. His workers had families' mortgages. If it comes to that, I'll make sure everyone gets paid, even if I have to take out a loan against my house. The team dispersed, leaving Jake with Mike. You really think she can pull this off? Mike asked quietly. Going against the board is serious business. Jake watched his crew return to work, each person relying on him for their livelihood. She has to, for all our sakes. That evening, Jake picked up Lily from school, trying to focus on her excited chatter about the class pet, while his mind raced through contingency plans. If Rebecca failed to regain control, if Stanley succeeded in forcing them off the project. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. Melanie's number flashed on the screen. We're still on for Saturday, right? Melanie sounded nervous. For me to see Lily, Jake glanced at his daughter, now digging through her backpack for a drawing she wanted to show him. Yes, 10 o'clock at the park near our apartment. Thank you, Jake. Melanie paused. I know you have no reason to give me this chance. Jake thought of Rebecca's words about children needing truth, even difficult ones. I'm not doing it for you. This is for Lily. After hanging up, Jake knelt beside his daughter. Lily, remember how we talked about your mom, about how she went away when you were little? Lily nodded solemnly, because she wasn't ready to be a mommy. Jake took a deep breath. She wants to see you this weekend. Would that be okay with you? Lily's eyes widened, a mix of emotions crossing her face, confusion, hope, uncertainty. Will she stay this time? The innocent question broke Jake's heart. I don't know, Pumpkin, but I'll be right there with you the whole time. Lily considered this, her small face serious. Will Rebecca still come over for cookies, even if my real mom comes back? The question caught Jake off guard. Why do you ask that? Lily shrugged. Because I like Rebecca. She listens to me about dinosaurs and doesn't look at her phone all the time like Jimmy's mom does on playdates. Jake pulled his daughter into a hug, struck by her simple wisdom. If Rebecca wants to come over, she's always welcome, no matter what happens with anyone else. As Lily returned to unpacking her backpack, Jake found himself facing the truth he'd been avoiding in just a few short months. Rebecca Morgan had become an important part of their lives, not because of her wealth or position, but because of who she was beneath those things. And he wasn't ready to let that go. Corporate politics and tabloids be damned. The next morning brought crisis. Jake arrived at the site to find city officials posting notices on the fence, another stop work order, this time claiming code violations that hadn't existed during the previous week's inspection. Mike examined the notice, face grim. This is bogus. We passed every code check yesterday. Jake pulled out his phone to call Rebecca, then remembered her situation. Instead, he called Diane Martinez, Morgan Development's legal counsel, who had helped with the previous permit issue. Mr. Sullivan, I was just about to call you. Diane sounded stressed. I'm afraid I can't offer assistance this time. I've been instructed by Mr. Wilson that all Richardson project matters are under his direct supervision now. Jake paced alongside the fence. This is sabotage, Diane. You know that. Off the record, her voice dropped. Yes, but my hands are tied until the board resolves the leadership question. The emergency meeting isn't until tomorrow morning. Jake thanked her and hung up, staring at the idle construction site. His crew stood in clusters, uncertainty and worry evident on their faces. They were counting on this paycheck, rent, mortgages, children's needs. Mike approached cautiously. What's the play, boss? Jake made his decision. Get everyone together. I need to talk to the whole crew. Once the team assembled, Jake stood before them, honest about the situation. The company politics at Morgan Developments have spilled over onto our project. This stop work order is part of that fight. He took a deep breath. I can't ask you all to wait this out without pay. So I'm offering 2 weeks' salary from my personal accounts to anyone who needs to find other work. Murmurs rippled through the group. Mike stepped forward. And if we choose to stay, Jake met his friend's gaze. Then we fight this. Document everything, appeal the stop work order, and be ready to restart the moment we get clearance. To Jake's surprise, not a single worker took the offer to leave. Mike grinned. Told you, Sullivan Construction takes care of its own. We take care of each other. The solidarity of his team strengthened Jake's resolve. While the crew handled documentation and site security, Jake headed to City Hall to contest the stop work order personally. Hours of bureaucratic red tape later, Jake emerged with no resolution but a promise of expedited review. His phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Emergency board meeting moved up to tomorrow, 8 a.m. Keep fighting. Jake texted back, crew standing strong, will hold the line. That night, after putting Lily to bed, Jake sat at his kitchen table surrounded by project documents, searching for anything that might help Rebecca's case. His doorbell rang unexpectedly. Rebecca stood in the hallway looking exhausted but determined. I hope it's not too late to visit. Jake stepped back, allowing her inside. Never. She moved to the kitchen table, eyeing the spread of documents. I see you've been preparing too. Jake offered her coffee, which she accepted gratefully. Stanley's moved aggressively. Stop work order code violations that didn't exist yesterday. He's trying to bury the project before you can stop him. Rebecca nodded, warming her hands on the mug. Charles Blackwood is helping me. He's found evidence Stanley's been siphoning funds from the company for months. She pulled out a flash drive. Everything's here: unauthorized transactions, falsified reports, even emails discussing plans to sell the Richardson property to Westfield developers once I'm ousted. Jake examined the flash drive. Will it be enough? It has to be. Rebecca's composure cracked slightly, revealing the weight she carried. My father trusted me to protect his legacy. I can't fail him. Jake moved to sit beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. You're not alone in this fight. Rebecca turned to face him fully, something vulnerable in her expression. That's why I came tonight. To thank you. Most people would have walked away from this mess weeks ago. I'm not most people. Jake held her gaze. And what's happening between us? It matters to me. It matters to Lily. Rebecca's breath caught. Jake, if tomorrow goes badly, if Stanley wins, then we'll figure it out. Jake reached for her hand. Together. The word hung between them, full of promise and uncertainty. Rebecca leaned forward, her free hand coming up to rest against Jake's cheek. The kiss that followed was gentle at first, then deepened with weeks of unspoken longing. When they finally parted, Rebecca rested her forehead against his. I should go. Big day tomorrow. Jake nodded reluctantly, releasing her hand. Call me, whatever happens. At the door, Rebecca paused, turning back with newfound determination in her eyes. You know what my father always said about business? Build something that outlasts you. I think he meant more than buildings. As she disappeared down the hallway, Jake felt certain of one thing amid all the uncertainty. Whatever happened with the board meeting with Melanie, with the Richardson project, what he and Rebecca were building together was worth fighting for. Morning light streaked through the blinds of Jake's apartment as he knotted his tie, a sense of unease settling in his chest. Lily sat at the kitchen counter, pushing cereal around her bowl, unusually quiet for a Saturday morning. Everything okay, Pumpkin? Jake smoothed her hair, already knowing the answer. Lily looked up, her eyes wide with uncertainty. What if she doesn't like me anymore? What if I don't remember her? The innocence of the questions pierced Jake's heart. Today was the scheduled meeting with Melanie, Lily's first glimpse of her mother in 3 years. He crouched to her level, his hands gentle on her small shoulders. Your mom will love you, Lily, and it's okay if you don't remember everything. This is just about saying hello, seeing how it feels. He kept his tone steady despite the storm of his own emotions. Remember, I'll be right there the whole time. Lily nodded solemnly. And then we're making cookies with Rebecca after. Jake hesitated. He hadn't heard from Rebecca since she'd left his apartment 2 nights before. The emergency board meeting had been scheduled for early yesterday, but his texts had gone unanswered. Only a brief message late last night confirmed she was still coming to bake cookies, as promised, a commitment she'd clearly chosen to keep despite whatever had transpired with the board. That's right, she's coming at 2. Jake checked his watch. We should get going. The park isn't far, but we want to be on time. The neighborhood park was quiet for a Saturday, just a few families scattered across the playgrounds and grassy areas. Jake led Lily to a bench near the duck pond, neutral territory, public, but not crowded. He spotted Melanie before Lily did, walking purposefully along the path, her blonde hair shorter than he remembered, her face thinner. Jake squeezed Lily's hand. That's her coming this way. Lily pressed closer to his side, suddenly shy. Melanie approached her, smile, nervous eyes fixed on the daughter she'd abandoned. She stopped a few feet away, as if uncertain how close she was allowed to come. Hi, Lily, her voice wavered slightly. You've gotten so big. Lily said nothing, studying her mother with serious eyes. Jake nudged her gently. It's okay. You can say hello. Hello? The word emerged as barely a whisper. Melanie sat on the bench opposite them, maintaining a respectful distance. I brought something for you. She held out a small package wrapped in dinosaur paper. Your dad mentioned you like dinosaurs now. Lily accepted the gift cautiously, looking to Jake for permission, before unwrapping it, a detailed model of a Triceratops, museum quality. Despite her innocence, Lily's eyes lit up. Thank you. She examined the dinosaur carefully. It's a female, you can tell by the frill patterns. Melanie smiled, genuine warmth breaking through her nervousness. I didn't know that. You must know a lot about dinosaurs. The ice began to thaw as Lily launched into dinosaur facts, her natural enthusiasm gradually overcoming her shyness. Jake watched their interaction carefully, noting how Melanie listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions. Whatever her faults, she seemed genuinely interested in the child she'd abandoned. After 30 minutes of increasingly comfortable conversation, Jake excused himself to buy drinks from a nearby vendor, giving mother and daughter a moment alone while remaining within eyesight. When he returned, Lily was showing Melanie her collection of rocks gathered from previous park visits. Jake handed Melanie a coffee, their fingers briefly touching during the exchange. Thank you. She met his gaze, something apologetic in her expression. She's amazing, Jake. You've done an incredible job with her. Jake lowered himself back onto the bench. She did most of the work herself. Kids are resilient. Even so, Melanie looked down at her coffee. I need to explain about why I left. Jake stiffened. This isn't the time or place for that conversation. I know, but I want to see her again. Regularly, and I owe you both an explanation first. Before Jake could respond, his phone buzzed with a text. Rebecca, board meeting over. Need to talk. Can I come earlier? Important news. Jake texted back quickly. We're at the park with Melanie, back by noon. 3 dots appeared, disappeared. Then I'll be there at 12:30. We'll explain everything. Jake pocketed his phone, turning his attention back to the increasingly animated conversation between Lily and her mother. Despite his lingering anger toward Melanie, he couldn't deny the joy on his daughter's face as she reconnected with the woman who'd given her life. As their scheduled hour together drew to a close, Melanie knelt before Lily. Would it be okay if I came to see you again next week? Lily looked to Jake, seeking his permission. He nodded slightly. I'd like that, she answered. Melanie stood brushing grass from her jeans. Jake, could we talk privately for a minute before I go? He instructed Lily to feed the ducks while staying within sight, then turned to Melanie with guarded expression. I'm listening. I was diagnosed with severe postpartum depression after Lily was born. Melanie's words tumbled out as if she'd rehearsed them, but still found them difficult to voice. It went untreated for years. By the time I left, I was barely functioning. I convinced myself you and Lily would be better off without me. Jake absorbed this information, memories shifting into new perspective, Melanie's withdrawal, her unexplained crying, her increasing detachment. Signs he'd attributed to falling out of love with their family. Why didn't you tell me we could have gotten help? Melanie shook her head. I was ashamed, terrified of being seen as an unfit mother. She took a deep breath. After I left, I checked myself into a treatment program in Arizona. Been in therapy ever since. It took 3 years to rebuild myself enough to face what I'd done. Jake studied her face, seeing the sincerity, the regret, but also the stability that had been missing before. I appreciate you telling me this. It helps make sense of things. I don't expect forgiveness, Jake, or even understanding. I just want a chance to be part of Lily's life again, however much or little you're comfortable with. Melanie glanced toward their daughter, now happily surrounded by ducks. She deserves to know her mother loves her, even if I failed to show it before. Something tight and long-held loosened in Jake's chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. We'll take it slow. See how Lily adjusts. That's all I can offer right now. Melanie nodded, relief evident in her posture. That's more than I deserve. Thank you. She hesitated. The woman who texted you, Rebecca. Lily mentioned her a few times. Jake tensed slightly. What about her? Lily seems to care about her a lot. I'm glad. Melanie's voice softened. I'm glad you found someone, Jake. Truly. Before Jake could clarify the complicated reality of his relationship with Rebecca, Lily came running back, effectively ending their conversation. They said their goodbyes, Melanie promising to call during the week to arrange their next visit. As Jake walked Lily home, his emotions swirled relief that the meeting had gone well. Lingering anger at Melanie's abandonment tempered with new understanding and growing anxiety about Rebecca's cryptic message. The board meeting was over, but he still didn't know the outcome. Had she maintained control of her company, or was Stanley now firmly in charge? Jake and Lily arrived home just as Rebecca's car pulled up to the curb. She emerged looking exhausted but determined, dressed casually in jeans and a light sweater. Jake searched her expression for clues, but her professional mask was firmly in place until she caught sight of Lily running toward her. Rebecca. Lily launched herself forward for a hug. We're going to make cookies today. Daddy bought all the stuff. Rebecca's composure melted as she embraced Lily. I've been looking forward to it all week. She met Jake's gaze over Lily's head, a silent promise to explain everything once they were inside. In the apartment, Jake set Lily up with ingredients, while Rebecca excused herself to take an important call. When she returned to the kitchen, her expression was unreadable. Lily, would you mind getting your special dinosaur cookie cutters from your room, the ones you told me about? Rebecca's request was gentle but deliberate. Once Lily disappeared down the hallway, Rebecca turned to Jake, her voice low. The board voted yesterday morning. It was close, but with Charles Blackwood's support and the evidence of Stanley's embezzlement, I maintained control. Relief flooded Jake's system. That's great news. So the Richardson project is moving forward as planned. Rebecca glanced toward Lily's bedroom. But there's more. Stanley didn't take his defeat gracefully. He's threatening lawsuits, feeding more stories to the tabloids, even approaching our contractors directly. Jake's muscles tensed. Has he reached out to my crew? Not yet, but I wanted to warn you he might. Rebecca moved closer, lowering her voice further. Jake, this isn't over. Stanley still has allies on the board. He's determined to undermine me at every turn. What can I do? Rebecca's expression softened. You're already doing it, standing by me, believing in me. She hesitated. But there's something else. Stanley is specifically targeting our relationship, claiming it's clouding my judgment. Jake ran a hand through his hair, frustration building. So we're back to that again. You're bored thinking you can't have both a personal life and run a company. It's not just the board. Rebecca's voice tightened. Stanley is stirring up the shareholders, suggesting I'm emotionally unstable since my father's death. Our tabloid coverage is just ammunition for him. The implications settled heavily between them. Before Jake could respond, Lily returned dinosaur cookie cutters clutched triumphantly in her small hands. Found them? Now we can make T-Rex cookies. Her excitement cut through the tension. Rebecca summoned a bright smile. Perfect. Let's get started. For the next hour, they focused on baking Rebecca, following Lily's enthusiastic instructions with genuine enjoyment, despite her obvious exhaustion. Jake watched them together, his heart constricting at the easy affection between them, while the cookies baked, filling the apartment with the comforting scent of vanilla and cinnamon. Rebecca excused herself to the balcony for some air. Jake found her leaning against the railing, her shoulders tense. How did it go with Melanie? She turned as he joined her, genuine concern in her voice. Jake leaned beside her, their shoulders almost touching. Better than expected. She's changed, more stable, more present. She explained some things that helped make sense of why she left. Rebecca nodded thoughtfully. And Lily? How did she handle it? Like the resilient little person she is. Cautious at first, then gradually warming up. Jake smiled faintly. She asked if Melanie would be at her birthday party next month. That's a good sign. Rebecca gazed out at the modest view, seemingly lost in thought. Jake, about what I said before, about Stanley targeting our relationship? Jake turned to face her fully. If you're about to suggest we stop seeing each other, I'd rather you didn't. Rebecca's eyes widened slightly at his directness. I need to focus on securing my position at the company. My father's legacy depends on it. Her voice softened. But the thought of stepping back from you and Lily, it hurts more than I expected it would. Jake reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. Then don't. We'll be more discreet if needed, but I'm not interested in pretending we don't care about each other. Rebecca's grip tightened. It won't be easy. Stanley won't stop just because he lost one vote. Nothing worth having ever is. Jake's voice dropped to a near whisper. The question is, do you think we're worth fighting for? Rebecca's answer was interrupted by the oven timer. Lily's excited call from the kitchen pulled them back inside, the moment suspended but not forgotten. As they decorated cookies with colorful icing, Jake's phone rang, Mike's number flashing on the screen. He excused himself to answer. Boss, we've got trouble. Mike's voice was tight with urgency. Someone broke into the construction trailer last night. Plans are missing and the place is trashed. Jake moved to the hallway, tension rippling through him. Have you called the police? They're here now, but there's more. The intruder bypassed our security system like they knew the codes, and they only took the original architectural plans and your copies of the contract. Jake's mind raced, connecting dots. Targeted theft, specific documents. That's what I'm thinking. This wasn't random vandalism. Jake glanced back at the kitchen where Rebecca and Lily were laughing over lopsided dinosaur cookies. Secure what's left. I'll be there as soon as I can. When he returned to the kitchen, Rebecca immediately sensed something was wrong. What happened? Jake kept his voice casual, conscious of Lily's presence. Issue at the site. I need to head over there for a bit. Rebecca studied his face, clearly reading between the lines. I can stay with Lily if that helps. She glanced at the little girl, now focused on perfecting a Stegosaurus cookie. Would that be okay, Lily, if I stayed while your dad runs to work for a little while? Lily looked up, beaming. Yes, we can make the next batch with rainbow sprinkles. Jake hesitated, torn between concern over the break-in and reluctance to cut short their afternoon together. Are you sure? I know you have your own fires to put out right now. Rebecca's smile was gentle but determined. Go. We'll be fine. The construction site was cordoned off with police tape when Jake arrived. Mike met him at the entrance, expression grim. 2 police officers were examining the damaged trailer while a third took photos. They got in clean, knew exactly what they were looking for. Mike led Jake toward the trailer. Security cameras were disabled first. Professional job. Jake surveyed the damaged drawers, emptied files, scattered, his desk overturned. But the chaos felt deliberate, theatrical, even as if designed to mask the precision of what had actually been taken. The original plans and my contract copies. Nothing else. Jake crouched to examine the broken lock on his filing cabinet. Mike nodded. Plus your laptop. But they left the petty cash in the expensive survey equipment. One of the officers approached, notebook in hand. Mr. Sullivan, we've taken your foreman's statement, but we need yours as well. Any idea who might have wanted these specific documents? Jake chose his words carefully. We're working on a high-profile renovation for Morgan Developments, the Richardson project. There's been some internal politics within the company recently. The officer made notes. Any specific threats or concerns prior to this break-in? Jake thought of Stanley's thinly veiled warnings, the manipulated permit issues, the tabloid stories. Nothing specific, no, but the project has hit some unusual obstacles. After giving his statement in securing what remained of the site, Jake called Rebecca. She answered immediately, concern evident in her voice. How bad is it? Professional job. They took the original plans and my contract copies. Jake lowered his voice, moving away from the officers. This has Stanley written all over it. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. I've been thinking the same thing. But why those specific documents? The plans are filed with the city, and I have copies of all contracts. Unless, Jake's mind raced, unless he's planning to alter them, create evidence that we deviated from approved plans or violated contract terms. That would give him grounds to terminate your company from the project. Rebecca's voice hardened with realization. And with you removed, he could bring in his own people to change the Richardson development completely. We need to move fast. If he submits altered documents to the city, I'll call Diane immediately, have her request certified, copies of everything on file with the planning department. Rebecca paused. Jake, be careful. If Stanley's willing to orchestrate a break-in, I'm more concerned about you. He's clearly desperate. Rebecca's voice softened. Lily and I are having a great time. She's been telling me all about seeing her mother today. She seems processing it well. The abrupt shift to domestic concerns amidst corporate sabotage struck Jake as surreal, yet oddly comforting. I'll be back soon. Don't let her talk you into using all the sprinkles in one batch. Too late. Rebecca's laugh eased some of the tension gripping his chest. By the time Jake returned home, the apartment smelled of sugar and vanilla, and Lily was showing Rebecca her dinosaur books while they waited for the final batch of cookies to cool. The domestic scene, his daughter curled against Rebecca on the couch, both absorbed in prehistoric facts, created a sharp contrast to the chaos of the construction site. Rebecca looked up as he entered, a silent question in her eyes. He gave a slight nod. Everything handled for now, and joined them on the couch. Daddy, we made so many cookies, and Rebecca knows almost all the dinosaur names now. Lily's enthusiasm was contagious. Jake pulled her into a one-armed hug. Sounds like you two had fun while I was gone. As Lily launched into a detailed account of their baking adventures, Jake noticed Rebecca checking her phone, her expression tightening momentarily before she set it aside. Later, after Lily had been tucked in, Rebecca joined Jake on the balcony, 2 cups of coffee in hand. Diane confirmed my suspicions. Someone submitted revised plans for the Richardson project this afternoon with Stanley's signature, and yours. Jake took the offered cup, anger flaring. My signature was forged. Rebecca nodded grimly. Diane caught it because she recognized it wasn't your handwriting. She's halted the processing, but if she hadn't been looking specifically, he would have gotten away with it. Jake's grip tightened on the mug. What's our next move? I've called an emergency board meeting for Monday morning. With evidence of the forged documents and the police report about the break-in, even Stanley's allies will have trouble defending him. Rebecca sipped her coffee, her profile sharp against the evening sky. But Jake, this is going to get ugly before it gets better. I'm not backing down, Jake's voice was firm. Not from the project and not from this. He gestured between them. Rebecca turned to face him fully. That's what I needed to hear. She set down her cup, moving closer. Because I've made my decision. If protecting my father's legacy means fighting Stanley and the board and the tabloids, then that's what I'll do. But I'm not sacrificing what matters to me personally in the process. Jake closed the distance between them, his hand finding her waist. And what matters to you personally, Ms. Morgan? Rebecca's smile held a warmth reserved only for private moments. You, Lily, this. She leaned forward, her lips meeting his with certainty that hadn't been there before, the hesitation of previous weeks replaced by clear decision. When they parted, Jake rested his forehead against hers. Stay tonight. Rebecca tensed slightly. Lily knows you're important to us. Jake's voice was gentle but certain. She asked this morning if you could be here for breakfast, before I even mentioned you were coming over. Rebecca's expression softened. I should warn you, my cooking skills are still limited to cookies and cereal. Good thing I make a mean pancake then. The weekend passed in domestic tranquility that belied the corporate storm brewing. Rebecca worked remotely, preparing for Monday's confrontation, while Jake and Lily included her in their routine grocery shopping, playground visits, Sunday night movies on the couch. By Sunday evening, it felt as though Rebecca had always been part of their lives. Monday morning arrived with tense anticipation. Rebecca, dressed in one of the emergency outfits she kept in her car, a power suit that transformed her from the woman who had made dinosaur-shaped pancakes into the CEO of Morgan Developments. I'll call you as soon as the meeting ends. She kissed Jake quickly at the door, then bent to hug Lily. Save me some of those dinosaur drawings, okay? I want to see them later. Lily nodded seriously. I'll make a special one just for your office. Jake spent the morning at the construction site implementing additional security measures while awaiting news. By noon, the entire crew was on edge, knowing their jobs hinged on the outcome of a corporate power struggle happening across town. When his phone finally rang, Jake stepped away for privacy. "How did it go?" Rebecca's voice was tight with barely contained emotion. "Stanley's been removed from the company, effective immediately." The board voted unanimously after seeing the evidence. Relief washed through Jake. "That's fantastic news." "There's more." Rebecca took an audible breath. "Stanley wasn't working alone. He'd partnered with Westfield developers to acquire the Richardson property once I was ousted. And his contact at Westfield was—" Jake already knew before she finished. "Melanie." "Yes, she's been working for them for almost a year. Their plan was to convert the property into luxury condos." Rebecca's voice softened with sympathy. "I'm sorry, Jake. I know you were just beginning to rebuild trust with her for Lily's sake." Jake absorbed this revelation, pieces clicking into place: Melanie's sudden reappearance, her convenient move back to Oakland, her interest in his work. "Does she know you've discovered this?" "Not yet. The board meeting was confidential." Rebecca paused. "Jake, what will you tell Lily?" Jake watched his crew working diligently across the site, men and women who had stood by him through the entire ordeal. "The truth, as much as she can understand at 6, that sometimes people make bad choices, but it doesn't mean we stop trying to see the good in them. You're a remarkable father." Rebecca's voice warmed. "I'm heading to the site now with Diane to reinstate the proper documents. We should be there within the hour." After hanging up, Jake gathered his crew, sharing the good news about the project's secure future while omitting the personal complications. The relief was palpable. Jobs secured, paychecks guaranteed, the vision they'd been working toward preserved. Mike approached as the team dispersed back to work. "So the Dragon Lady came through after all." His tone was appreciative despite the nickname. Jake smiled slightly. "She fought for what she believed in, for what her father believed in." He looked around at the half-completed community center. "And for what we're building here. Something that matters." An hour later, Rebecca's car pulled into the construction site. She emerged with Diane Martinez, both women carrying document portfolios. But they weren't alone. Charles Blackwood stepped out from the back seat, his distinguished presence commanding immediate attention. Jake met them near the entrance, shaking Blackwood's hand with genuine respect. "Mr. Blackwood, I didn't expect to see you here." The older man surveyed the construction site with approving eyes. "I wanted to see Henry Morgan's final project for myself. Rebecca speaks highly of your work." As Diane moved off to handle the paperwork, Blackwood turned to Jake with unexpected candor. "Henry was my closest friend for 40 years, Mr. Sullivan. He would have approved of you, I think, both professionally and personally." Jake glanced at Rebecca, noting the slight color rising in her cheeks. "That means a lot, sir." Rebecca has her father's vision and her mother's steel. Blackwood's assessment carried the weight of decades of observation. "The board may have taken some convincing, but I never doubted she was the right person to carry on the Morgan legacy." Rebecca touched her mentor's arm with genuine affection. "Thank you for standing by me, Charles." Blackwood patted her hand. "Henry would have expected nothing less." He straightened his already impeccable tie. "Now I believe you two have business to discuss. I'll wait in the car." Once alone, Rebecca led Jake toward the partially constructed East Wing, the area that would eventually house childcare facilities and health services. "I wanted you to be the first to know. The board has approved additional funding for the Community Power Center. We're expanding the scope to include affordable housing units on the upper floors." Jake whistled low, imagining the additional work, the expanded impact. "That's incredible. But why the sudden change of heart from the board?" Rebecca smiled, satisfaction evident in her expression. "Let's just say Stanley's underhanded tactics forced them to take a closer look at the project's actual merits. Once they did, they saw what my father had always envisioned: community investment that benefits everyone, including shareholders." Jake studied her face, recognizing the passionate idealist beneath the CEO exterior. "Your father would be proud. You didn't just preserve his vision, you expanded it." "We expanded it." Rebecca emphasized the pronoun deliberately. "Your expertise made this possible, Jake. Your commitment to quality, to doing things right." As they walked the perimeter of what would become the community center's main hall, Rebecca pointed out features explaining how each space would serve neighborhood needs. Her enthusiasm was contagious, her knowledge impressive. This wasn't just her father's project anymore, but truly hers. There's one more thing we need to discuss. Rebecca stopped walking, turning to face Jake directly. Melanie. Jake nodded, his expression tightening. I'm meeting her this afternoon to talk about future visits with Lily. I'll confront her then. Rebecca placed a gentle hand on his arm. Are you sure that's wise, alone? I need to see her reaction, to understand if her interest in Lily was genuine or just part of their plan. Jake covered Rebecca's hand with his own. But I won't be meeting at the park this time, somewhere more public. Rebecca squeezed his hand in silent support. Whatever you decide to tell Lily, I'm here for both of you. The simple promise carried weight far beyond the immediate situation. Jake found himself imagining a future where Rebecca's presence in their lives was permanent, no longer a visitor or a temporary ally, but family. That afternoon, Jake sat in a busy downtown cafe watching Melanie approach through the window. She entered, spotted him, and threaded her way between tables with visible nervousness. No Lily today. She slid into the chair across from him, already sensing something was wrong. Jake kept his voice level. I think it's better we talk first, alone. Melanie's fingers fidgeted with her napkin. Is everything okay? Did something happen? You could say that. Jake leaned forward slightly. The board meeting at Morgan Developments this morning, interesting outcome. The color drained from Melanie's face, her expression confirming what Rebecca had discovered. Jake, I can explain. Explain what? How you used our daughter to spy on my business? How your sudden maternal instincts coincided perfectly with Stanley Wilson's plan to seize control of the Richardson project? Each question emerged calmer than the last, Jake's anger refined into something colder, more controlled. Melanie's composure crumbled. It wasn't like that, not at first. She drew a shaky breath. I did take the job with Westfield. And yes, they were interested in the Richardson property. But seeing Lily again, that was real, Jake. I swear it. You expect me to believe that? I was hired to gather information. That's true. Melanie's voice dropped to nearly a whisper. But I was already planning to reach out about Lily before any of this. Ask Mike's mother. I called her months ago, trying to find a way to approach you. Jake remembered Mrs. Chen mentioning a call from Melanie, a detail he'd dismissed at the time. Even if that's true, you still used our reunion to help Stanley undermine Rebecca and destroy the community center project. I didn't know about the community center until last week. Melanie's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. When I found out what they really planned to do with the property, I was going to back out. That's why I wanted to talk to you privately at the park. Jake studied her face, searching for deception. Why should I believe you? Melanie reached into her purse, withdrawing a folded document. Because I've been keeping notes, recordings, and insurance, I told myself. She slid the paper across the table. Everything Stanley told me about his plans, dates, times, who was involved. I was going to give it to you yesterday, but then you had company. Jake unfolded the paper, detailed notes of meetings, conversations, plans to forge documents, and sabotage the project. Information that aligned perfectly with what had actually occurred. If Melanie had invented this after the fact, she'd have needed psychic abilities. Why? Jake looked up, meeting her gaze directly. Why keep records if you were part of the plan? Because I know what it's like to lose everything that matters. Melanie's voice strengthened with conviction. I couldn't be part of destroying something important to my daughter's father. Not again. Jake refolded the document, tucking it into his pocket. This doesn't change what happened 3 years ago. I know. Melanie straightened her shoulders. I'm not asking for forgiveness or a second chance with you, Jake. Just the opportunity to be a mother to Lily, whatever that looks like. Jake considered her words, weighing the evidence against his instincts. We'll continue the visits, supervise for now. But if I ever have reason to believe you're using Lily again, I understand. Relief softened Melanie's features. Thank you. As Jake drove home, his thoughts churned with the day's revelations. Stanley's removal, the expanded community center plans, Melanie's complicated motivations, and through it all, Rebecca's steady presence, her unwavering support. He found her waiting at his apartment, having picked up Lily from school. They were curled on the couch together, Rebecca listening intently as Lily explained the papier-mâché volcano she'd made in class. The scene crystallized something in Jake's heart, a certainty he'd been moving towards since that first day on Monterey Beach. That night, after Lily was asleep, Jake and Rebecca sat on the balcony beneath a sky scattered with stars. He told her about his meeting with Melanie, showing her the notes that corroborated parts of Melanie's story. Do you believe her? Rebecca's question held no judgment, only curiosity. Jake nodded slowly. About regretting her role in Stanley's plan, yes. The timing of everything else, I'm less certain, but for Lily's sake, I'm willing to keep the door open, with caution. Rebecca leaned her head against his shoulder. You have an extraordinary capacity for seeing the best in people. Not everyone, Jake smiled faintly. I had you pegged all wrong at first. Thought you were just another entitled executive. Rebecca laughed softly. And I thought you were just another contractor who cut corners. Their preconceptions seemed absurd, now dissolved by months of shared challenges and deepening connection. Jake shifted to face her, suddenly serious. I need to ask you something. Rebecca straightened, sensing his change in tone. What is it? The Richardson project will be finished in about 8 months. What happens then? Jake watched her expression carefully. Between us, I mean. Understanding dawned in Rebecca's eyes. Are you asking about my intentions, Mr. Sullivan? I guess I am. Jake took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. Because I'm falling in love with you, Rebecca Morgan, and I need to know if we're building something temporary or something that lasts. Rebecca's breath caught vulnerability, replacing her teasing tone. I've never been good at temporary. Ask my board, I'm stubbornly committed to long-term vision. Her free hand came up to rest against his cheek. I'm falling in love with you too, Jake. With you and Lily both. Jake leaned into her touch. Then maybe we should start thinking beyond the Richardson project, beyond cookies and museum visits. What did you have in mind? Rebecca's question was soft open. A life together, the three of us. Jake's voice held certainty that surprised even him. Not right away, we'll take it slow, do it right. But I want you to know that's where I'm heading. Rebecca's smile illuminated her entire face. I'd like that. Very much. 3 months later, Jake stood on Monterey Beach, watching the waves crash against the shore. Lily raced along the water's edge, collecting shells and calling out her discoveries. The same beach where he'd pulled Rebecca from the water now held new memories. Weekend trips, sandcastle competitions, sunset walks. Rebecca joined him, slipping her hand into his. Penny for your thoughts. Jake squeezed her fingers. Just thinking about how different things were the last time we were here. Rebecca leaned against his shoulder. You saved my life that day, in more ways than one. We saved each other. Jake turned to face her fully. Which is why this feels like the right place. Rebecca's brow furrowed in confusion. Right place for what? Jake reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. Rebecca's eyes widened as he lowered himself to one knee in the sand. I don't have a mansion or a fortune to offer you. Jake opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant ring. But I have 2 strong hands that will build whatever future we dream of, and a heart that's completely yours. Will you marry me, Rebecca? Tears spilled down Rebecca's cheeks as she nodded. Yes, 1,000 times yes. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Lily came running over, eyes bright with excitement. Did you ask her, Daddy? Did you ask her? Jake laughed, lifting his daughter into his arms. I did, Pumpkin. Rebecca's going to be part of our family now. Lily threw her arms around both of them. Finally, I've been waiting forever. The 3 of them stood embraced on the shore, waves lapping at their feet, the future stretching before them, not perfect, not without challenges, but built on the strongest foundation. Jake knew love, freely given, trust, hard-won, and the promise of a home where they all truly belonged. 6 months later, the Richardson Community Center opened to the public. Crowds gathered for the ribbon-cutting ceremony, neighborhood families, mixing with corporate executives and city officials. Jake stood slightly behind Rebecca as she addressed the crowd, her speech eloquent yet heartfelt, paying tribute to her father's vision while establishing her own. This center represents what's possible when business serves community. Rebecca concluded, her voice carrying across the gathered faces. It's a promise that profit and purpose can coexist, that we can build structures that shelter bodies while also nurturing spirits. As applause erupted, Jake felt a fierce pride watching the woman who would soon be his wife. She stepped back, gesturing for him to join her at the podium. None of this would be possible without Sullivan Construction. Rebecca acknowledged, her hand finding his. Their commitment to quality and integrity is evident in every beam, every brick, every detail of this building. The ceremony concluded with Lily being invited forward to help cut the ribbon. Three pairs of hands, small, medium, and large, held the oversized scissors together, a visual representation of what they'd become: a family, united by choice, by shared purpose, by love, that had emerged from the most unexpected beginning. Later that evening, as sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Jake and Rebecca stood on the rooftop garden of the newly completed center. Below them, community members explored the facilities, children playing in the daycare area, adults checking out job training resources, families registering for healthcare services. Your father would be proud. Jake wrapped his arm around Rebecca's waist. Not just of the building, but of you. How you fought for his vision and made it your own. Rebecca leaned into his embrace. Sometimes I feel him here watching over this place. She smiled up at Jake. I think he would have liked you. Even though I'm just a contractor, Jake teased, referencing Stanley's dismissive label. Rebecca's expression grew serious. You're the man who taught me that true wealth isn't measured in property portfolios. It's in moments like these. She gestured toward Lily, who was showing younger children how to plant seedlings in the community garden boxes. In the family we've built, in the home we've created together. Jake pulled her closer, overwhelmed by how far they'd come since that fateful day on Monterey Beach. Speaking of home, have you made a decision about the house? They'd been house hunting for weeks, torn between practical considerations and emotional attachments. Rebecca nodded against his shoulder. I have. Let's take the one in Oakland, the fixer-upper with the big yard. Jake pulled back, slightly surprised. Not the finished place in the hills. I thought you loved the view. Rebecca's smile held certainty. I'd rather have a home we build together, something that has all our fingerprints on it, even the imperfect parts. She laced her fingers through his. Besides, some of my happiest memories are of watching you work with your hands. Jake lifted their intertwined fingers, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. Then we'll build it together. Every nail, every board, every memory. As darkness settled over Oakland, lights illuminated the community center from within, a beacon of possibility in the neighborhood. Jake watched his soon-to-be wife and daughter planting seeds in the garden boxes, their heads bent together in concentration, and felt a profound gratitude for the unexpected currents that had brought them all together. Life had taught Jake Sullivan that nothing was guaranteed, not relationships, not success, not security. But standing there watching the two people he loved most in the world building something new together, he knew with absolute certainty that whatever storms might come, they would weather them as they had everything else together, stronger, for having found each other, rich in the ways that truly mattered.